The phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. with a message that shattered my world forever. My wife Victoria wasn't texting her sister about Emma's school play like she claimed. She was confirming the final payment for selling our 8-year-old daughter to strangers. Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more intense betrayal and revenge stories. And let us know where you are listening in the comments. I stared at that phone screen until my eyes burned, reading those words over and over, hoping I was losing my mind. Hoping this was some kind of nightmare brought on by too many overseas missions, too much time in hostile territory. But the cold metal of Victoria's phone in my hands was real. The messages were real. The betrayal was real. My name is David Chun, and I've spent 12 years in counterterrorism operations. I've seen humanity at its absolute worst: terrorists, war criminals, monsters who trade in human suffering. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for discovering that the woman I'd loved for 10 years had become one of them. It started 3 days earlier when Emma didn't come home from school. Victoria called me at the base, her voice shaking with what I thought was panic. "David, Emma's missing. The school says she never got on the bus. I've called everyone. I don't know what happened." I drove home doing 90 on the interstate, my heart hammering against my ribs. My little girl with her gap-toothed smile and pigtails, who still needed me to check under her bed for monsters before she could sleep. Gone. Victoria was pacing our living room when I burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing into my chest. What if something terrible happened? What if we never see her again? I held her tight, feeling her shake against me. "We'll find her, Vic. I promise you, we'll find her." That first night, I barely slept. I kept checking Emma's empty room, touching her stuffed animals, inhaling the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo, still clinging to her pillow. Victoria curled up beside me, whispering prayers I'd never heard her say before. The police treated it like a routine missing child case at first. They asked the usual questions: any family disputes, custody issues, places Emma might hide. I answered everything while my mind raced through worst-case scenarios. In my line of work, you know exactly what happens to missing children. You know the statistics that keep parents awake at night. But something felt off. Victoria's tears seemed performed. Her panic had edges that didn't quite fit. When Detective Rodriguez asked about her activities that day, she stumbled over details that should have been automatic. Where exactly did she drop Emma off? What time? Who did she talk to? I was distracted, Victoria kept saying. I had a headache. I can't remember everything perfectly. On the second day, I noticed Victoria checking her phone constantly. She'd glance at it, tense up, then quickly shove it back in her purse. When I asked who was texting, she'd say it was her sister Melody, or her mom, or people from work sending support. Can I see? I asked once, reaching for her phone. She yanked it away so fast she nearly dropped it. David, seriously? You want to read my private messages while our daughter is missing? What's wrong with you? I backed off, but that defensive reaction planted a seed of doubt that grew like cancer in my chest. The third night, Victoria took sleeping pills, said she couldn't handle being awake anymore. I waited until her breathing deepened, then I did what my training taught me. I investigated. Her phone was on the nightstand, and I knew her passcode, Emma's birthday. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through her messages. At first, everything looked normal. Concerned friends, worried family members, work colleagues offering help. Then I found the encrypted messaging app hidden in a folder labeled Shopping Lists. The messages made my blood turn to ice water. Conversations with someone called Phoenix about the package delivery and final payment. Discussions about Emma's schedule, her route home from school, her fears and habits that only a mother would know. And then, the message that destroyed everything. Package delivered successfully. Payment confirmed. She's exactly as described, blonde, 8 years old, very trusting. Your debt is cleared, Victoria. Pleasure doing business. Victoria had replied, thank you. Just, please make sure she's treated well. She's still my daughter. I dropped the phone like it was on fire, stumbling backward into our bathroom. I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror, a man whose entire world had just collapsed. The woman sleeping in our bed, the woman I'd built a life with, had sold our child to human traffickers. But here's what Victoria didn't know about her husband. She didn't know that David Chun wasn't just any counterterrorism operative. She didn't know about the specialized unit I really worked for, or the particular set of skills that made me very, very good at finding people who didn't want to be found. She thought she was married to a regular soldier. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone trained to hunt monsters exactly like the ones she'd given our daughter to. I spent the rest of that night in my home office, methodically going through every piece of Victoria's digital life like I was dissecting a terrorist cell. Bank records, credit card statements, phone logs, social media activity, everything told the same horrifying story I'd refused to see. The gambling started 8 months ago. Small bets at first, then bigger ones. Victoria had burned through our savings, maxed out credit cards I didn't know existed, and borrowed money from people whose names appeared in police databases. The kind of people who don't accept "I can't pay" as an answer. Phoenix wasn't just a trafficker. He was a loan shark who'd offered Victoria an alternative when the cash ran out. Her messages revealed months of negotiation, of her trying to find other ways to pay. She'd considered prostitution, considered stealing from my military accounts, considered running away entirely. But Emma was worth more than all of that combined. The worst part wasn't discovering my wife was a drug addict and a gambler. The worst part was reading her detailed descriptions of our daughter to these monsters. Emma's favorite foods, her bedtime routine, how she sucked her thumb when scared. Victoria had created a catalog of Emma's vulnerabilities, making her more valuable to buyers who wanted a specific type of child. She's very obedient, Victoria had written. Never fights or argues. Trusts adults completely. Excellent for training purposes. Training purposes. I had to run to the bathroom and vomit. When Victoria woke up the next morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper, looking like any other concerned father waiting for news about his missing daughter. She shuffled in wearing her robe, eyes puffy from crying and pills. "Any updates from the police?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I looked up from the sports section, studying her face. "Detective Rodriguez says they're following several leads." He seemed optimistic. Victoria nodded, pouring herself coffee with shaking hands. "I keep thinking about what she must be going through. How scared she must be." The performance was flawless. If I didn't know the truth, I'd have pulled her into my arms and promised everything would be okay. Instead, I watched my wife of 10 years lie to my face about selling our child, and I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. "Vic, can I ask you something?" I kept my voice gentle, concerned. "Yesterday you seemed to know exactly what time Emma's bus usually arrives, but you told the police you weren't sure when you dropped her off. Which is it?" For just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw panic flash across her features before she recovered. "I was upset, David. People don't think clearly when they're upset. You should know that." "Of course. I'm sorry for questioning you. But I'd gotten what I needed. Confirmation that Victoria was actively lying, actively covering her tracks. She wasn't a desperate mother who'd made one terrible mistake. She was a criminal protecting her operation. While Victoria called in sick to work and played the grieving mother for visiting relatives, I began my real investigation. I had resources Victoria couldn't imagine, databases that didn't officially exist, contacts and agencies that operated in the shadows between legal and necessary. Phoenix's real name was Thomas Carver, a mid-level trafficker who specialized in custom orders from wealthy clients overseas. His network moved children through a pipeline that started in American suburbs and ended in private compounds in countries with flexible laws about human property. Emma wasn't just missing. According to the financial trail, she was being prepared for international transport within 72 hours. The timeline meant Phoenix's people were still in the area, probably holding Emma and other children in a temporary facility while they processed paperwork and arranged travel documents. They'd want to move fast. Local law enforcement was asking questions, and missing child cases brought unwanted attention. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed they were dealing with a regular father and a cooperative mother. They had no idea that David Chun had spent years learning how to dismantle organizations exactly like theirs, and that he had 48 hours to do it again. I made 3 phone calls that afternoon, each to people whose numbers weren't stored in any official directory. By evening, I had Emma's probable location, Phoenix's travel schedule, and a complete map of his local operation. Victoria found me cleaning my service weapon in the garage that night, something I never did at home. "Honey, what are you doing?" I looked up at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face, and smiled. "Just making sure everything's ready. Tomorrow's going to be a very important day." She nodded and went back inside, probably thinking I was talking about meeting with police or search teams. I wasn't. I woke up at 5 a.m. to find Victoria's side of the bed empty. Through the bedroom window, I could see her in the backyard, smoking a cigarette with trembling fingers. She'd quit smoking 3 years ago when Emma started asking questions about why Mommy smelled funny. Old habits return when people are desperate. I watched her pace back and forth, talking rapidly on her phone. Even from this distance, I could see the frantic gestures, the way she kept looking over her shoulder toward the house. Whatever conversation she was having, it wasn't going well. My phone buzzed with a text from my contact at the agency. "Package located. Warehouse district. Time sensitive. Move today or lose the trail." Today. I had maybe 12 hours before Phoenix moved Emma and the other children to their next destination. After that, they'd disappear into a network spanning 3 continents, and finding them would become nearly impossible. Victoria came back inside just as I was getting dressed for what she thought was another day of waiting for police updates and praying for miracles. Her hands were still shaking, and there were fresh tear tracks on her cheeks. "Everything okay?" I asked, buttoning my shirt like this was any other morning. I called my mom. Told her about Emma. She's driving down from Portland to help us get through this." Another lie. Victoria's mother had been dead for 6 years. "That's good, Vic. We need all the support we can get right now." She nodded and headed toward the shower, but I noticed she took her phone with her. People don't usually worry about missing calls while washing their hair, unless those calls might determine whether they live or die. While the water was running, I accessed Victoria's laptop using a keylogger I'd installed 2 nights earlier. Her search history from the past week painted a picture of someone researching how to disappear. New identity documents, countries without extradition treaties, how to transfer money to offshore accounts. Victoria wasn't planning to stick around for Emma's rescue. She was planning to run. But the most disturbing discovery was a saved draft email address to someone called Buyer7. The message contained Emma's photo, her medical records, and what looked like a psychological profile written by someone who knew her intimately. Emma responds well to gentle authority and routine. She has mild separation anxiety, but can be comforted with simple rewards. No significant medical issues. Very affectionate and eager to please. Ideal for clients' specified requirements. The timestamp showed Victoria had been working on this document for 3 weeks. This wasn't a desperate decision made under pressure. This was a carefully planned transaction, negotiated over time, with Emma's personality and vulnerabilities cataloged like she was livestock. My phone rang. "Detective Rodriguez." "Mr. Chun, we've had a possible sighting of Emma near the industrial district. I'd like you and your wife to come down to the station to look at some security footage." "Perfect timing. We'll be there in an hour, Detective." Victoria emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, looking more composed than she had in days. Almost relieved. "That was Rodriguez," I told her. "They might have found something. We need to go identify some footage." For a split second, I saw a genuine panic flash across her face. Then she forced a smile. "That's wonderful news. Let me get dressed. While she was choosing her clothes, I made a decision that went against every protocol I'd ever been taught. I wasn't going to involve my unit officially. I wasn't going to request backup or authorization. Emma was my daughter, and Victoria was my responsibility. This was personal. I spent 15 minutes in my workshop gathering equipment that wasn't standard issue. Lockpicks, surveillance devices, communications gear that couldn't be traced back to official channels. Tools for a mission that didn't officially exist. Victoria came downstairs wearing her best concerned mother outfit. No makeup to hide her tears. Comfortable shoes for pacing hospital corridors. Her wedding ring turned inward so the diamond caught the light when she gestured. She'd perfected this performance over the past 4 days. Ready? She asked, grabbing her purse. Almost. I just need to make one quick call. I stepped outside and dialed my contact. I need a favor. Unofficial. Personal. How personal? My daughter personal. There was a long pause. In our line of work, family emergencies take precedence over everything else. We all know that the job makes us targets, and sometimes that targeting extends to people we love. What do you need? Someone to keep my wife busy for about 6 hours. Somewhere safe, somewhere public, somewhere she can't leave without making a scene. Consider it done. Victoria was checking her phone again when I came back inside, her face pale with whatever she was reading. Everything okay? I asked. She looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize anymore, desperate, calculating, afraid. David, what if we never find her? What if Emma's just gone? I walked over and took her hands in mine, looking directly into her eyes. We're going to find her, Victoria. I promise you that. And when we do, everyone responsible is going to pay for what they've done. She squeezed my hands and whispered, I love you. It was the last honest thing she would ever say to me. Victoria never made it to the police station. My contact intercepted her 3 blocks from our house. A staged fender bender that would keep her occupied with insurance forms and witness statements for hours. By the time she realized what was happening, I was already deep inside Phoenix's world. The warehouse sat in an industrial wasteland where legitimate businesses went to die. Rusted chain-link fences, broken windows, and the kind of silence that screams danger to anyone with half a brain. Perfect place to hide stolen children. I parked 2 miles away and approached on foot, using abandoned buildings as cover. 12 years of counter-terrorism ops had taught me how to move through hostile territory without casting a shadow. This felt different, though. Personal in a way that made my hands shake. Through my scope, I counted 6 guards rotating in predictable patterns. Amateur hour. These weren't hardened criminals. They were street thugs playing dress-up in Phoenix's operation. That was good news for me, bad news for them. The first guard went down silently behind a dumpster. Zip-tie restraints, pressure point knockout. He'd wake up with a headache and no memory of the past 10 minutes. The second guard was smoking near the loading dock, making enough noise to cover his own capture. Inside the warehouse, I heard them before I saw them. Children's voices, maybe 8 or 9 kids, reciting something in unison. As I got closer, I realized what it was. They were being taught to introduce themselves to strangers. My name is Emma. I'm 8 years old. I like drawing and playing with dolls. I'll be very good. My vision went red. Emma's voice, smaller and more scared than I'd ever heard it, practicing lines someone had written for her to say to her future owner. I found a ventilation shaft that gave me visual access to the main floor. The children sat in a circle on dirty mattresses, ranging in age from maybe 6 to 12. Emma was there, still wearing the school clothes she'd disappeared in 4 days ago, looking thin and pale but unharmed. A woman in her 50s was running them through their scripts while 2 men watched from folding chairs. Not Phoenix. I'd studied his photos. These were handlers, people who prepared merchandise for transport. Remember, children, tomorrow you're going on a very special trip. You'll meet new families who will take excellent care of you, but only if you follow all the rules we've practiced. Emma raised her hand. Can I call my daddy when we get there? The woman's voice turned cold. We've talked about this, Emma. Your old family doesn't want you anymore. That's why you're here. Your new family will be much better. I had to grip the metal ventilation shaft to keep from dropping through the ceiling right then. They were systematically destroying these children's sense of identity, making them compliant for whatever horror waited at the end of their journey. My earpiece crackled. David, this is Control. Your wife just filed a missing person report. Says you disappeared and she's worried about your mental state. Victoria was covering her tracks, painting me as an unstable veteran having a breakdown. Smart move. If I went off the grid to rescue Emma, she could claim I'd snapped under pressure and done something terrible. Copy that, I whispered back. How long before local PD starts looking for me? Maybe 2 hours if they take her seriously. 2 hours to infiltrate, extract 9 children, and neutralize Phoenix's entire local operation. Doable, but tight. I spent the next 30 minutes mapping the building's layout and cataloging threats. 3 armed guards inside, minimal security systems, 1 exit route that led directly to a loading dock where trucks waited for tomorrow's shipment. The trucks had license plates from 3 different states and cargo manifests listing furniture and electronics. These children were about to be shipped across the country like Amazon packages, sorted and delivered to buyers who'd probably been waiting months for their specific orders. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. David, where are you? The police want to interview us both. Please come home. I'm scared, still playing her role perfectly, even knowing I wasn't there to see the performance. I typed back, following a lead. Be home soon. Love you. Let her think I was just another desperate father chasing false hope while the real professionals handled the investigation. Let her feel safe for a few more hours. Because when this was over, Victoria was going to learn exactly what happened when you declared war on the wrong family. I checked my watch. The children were scheduled to move at dawn, less than 6 hours away. After that, finding them would require resources and jurisdiction I didn't have. But 6 hours was plenty of time to remind some very bad people why the good guys always win in the end. The real Phoenix arrived at midnight in a black SUV with diplomatic plates. I watched through night vision as Thomas Carver stepped out, checking his Rolex like he was running late for a board meeting instead of inspecting stolen children. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of confident walk that comes from years of buying his way out of consequences. He wasn't alone. 2 bodyguards flanked him, and a woman in designer clothes followed behind carrying a tablet and briefcase. This wasn't just a pickup. This was quality control. They disappeared inside the warehouse, and within minutes I could hear Phoenix's voice echoing through the building. Cold, businesslike, discussing the children like they were inventory. The blonde girl, Emma, she's exactly what Client 7 requested. Make sure she's in the first transport. The others can wait for regular processing. Emma was being fast-tracked to a specific buyer. Someone had paid extra to get her delivered quickly, probably because Victoria had provided such detailed information about her personality and vulnerabilities. I activated my recording equipment and settled in to document everything. This wasn't just about saving Emma anymore. It was about dismantling the entire network and making sure every person involved faced consequences. Phoenix's woman assistant was reading from her tablet, discussing logistics with military precision. Transport leaves at 0500. First stop is the facility in Nevada for medical processing, then air transport to Dubai. Final destinations vary by client requirements. Medical processing. They were going to drug these children, probably perform examinations to verify they matched their online descriptions. The thought made me physically sick. What's the status on the Chun girl's documentation? Phoenix asked. All complete. Her mother provided excellent cooperation. Social security number, medical records, even psychological evaluations from school. Very thorough. Victoria hadn't just sold Emma. She provided a complete dossier to help them manage her transport and placement. My wife had spent weeks helping strangers plan how to most effectively traumatize our daughter. Phoenix's voice carried clearly in the cold air. Good. Client 7 is paying premium prices for quick delivery and specific characteristics. This girl matches his requirements perfectly. Young, compliant, no significant family connections will cause problems. No significant family connections. Victoria had told them I was deployed overseas frequently and wouldn't notice Emma's absence for weeks. She'd painted me as an absent father who wouldn't look too hard for his missing daughter. She was wrong about that. My earpiece crackled with an update from Control. David, we've been monitoring police communications. Your wife just told Detective Rodriguez she thinks you might be having a PTSD episode. She's requesting they issue a welfare check. Perfect. Victoria was positioning herself as the concerned wife of an unstable veteran while simultaneously covering for her criminal partners. If anything went wrong tonight, she'd claim I'd gone rogue and attacked innocent people. Through my scope, I watched Phoenix inspect each child personally, checking their condition like a rancher examining livestock. When he reached Emma, he spent extra time reviewing her medical chart and observing her responses to simple commands. This one will do very well, he said to his assistant. Client 7 specifically requested someone with mild separation anxiety. Makes them more dependent on their new caregiver. The mother's psychological profile was extremely helpful. Emma was sitting quietly on her mattress, following all the rules they'd taught her, probably hoping that compliance would eventually lead to going home. She had no idea that her obedience was exactly what made her valuable to monsters. But I did. I spent the next hour photographing faces, recording conversations, and mapping the network connections Phoenix discussed. This wasn't just a local operation. It was a hub in an international system that moved hundreds of children annually. Names, locations, client numbers, transport schedules. Everything I needed to burn this entire operation to the ground. Phoenix checked his watch again. I want final preparations completed by 0400. No delays, no mistakes. We have very impatient clients waiting for their deliveries. He paused near Emma's mattress one more time. This little girl represents a significant investment. Her mother worked very hard to provide us with exactly what we needed. Make sure we don't disappoint. As they prepared to leave, Phoenix's assistant handed him a thick envelope. Final payment for the Chun contract. Mrs. Chun completed all requirements as specified. Victoria was getting paid tonight. Probably enough money to clear her gambling debts and start fresh somewhere new. Blood money for selling our daughter to sexual predators. But Victoria had made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed her husband was just another soldier following orders and respecting jurisdiction. She had no idea that David Chun had spent years learning how to operate outside official channels when official channels weren't enough. Phoenix's SUV disappeared into the night, leaving his handlers to manage the final preparations. I had less than 5 hours before the transport left with Emma and 8 other children. Time to remind everyone involved why you should never, ever threaten a counter-terrorism operative's family. At 2 a.m., Victoria's phone started buzzing with panicked messages. I intercepted them all through the surveillance equipment I'd planted in our house weeks ago. A precaution I'd taken after noticing her suspicious behavior, never imagining it would reveal something this horrific. Payment confirmed. Package ships at dawn. Your part is finished. Disappear like we discussed. Phoenix's people were cutting Victoria loose. She'd served her purpose, and now she was becoming a liability. In their world, desperate mothers who sold their children rarely lived long enough to develop guilt or confess to authorities. But Victoria wasn't going quietly. Her response came through encrypted channels. I need more time. David's asking questions. If I disappear now, he'll know something's wrong. She was trying to buy herself breathing room, probably planning to establish an alibi before Emma's transport was discovered missing. Smart, but not smart enough. Because while Victoria was focused on managing her exit strategy, I was methodically gathering everything I needed to destroy every person involved in this network. The warehouse handlers had gotten sloppy during their night shift. They were drinking, playing cards, treating this like any other job instead of the life or death situation it actually was. Perfect opportunity for intelligence gathering. I slipped through their perimeter using skills learned in places that don't appear on official maps. Within an hour, I had access to their computer systems, their client databases, and their complete operational plans. What I found made me understand that Emma's situation was even worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just human trafficking. It was a sophisticated auction system where buyers could specify exact requirements for children. Age, appearance, personality traits, even specific fears and vulnerabilities that would make them easier to control. Client 7 had requested a blonde girl between 8 and 10 years old with documented separation anxiety and a history of obedience to authority figures. Victoria's detailed psychological profile of Emma had made her the perfect match. The purchase price was $300,000. Victoria was getting $50,000 as a finder's fee, with the rest going to Phoenix's organization for transport and processing. My daughter's childhood was worth $50,000 to her own mother. But the database revealed something even more disturbing. This wasn't Victoria's first involvement with Phoenix's network. She'd been providing information about other children in Emma's school for months. Kids whose parents traveled frequently, whose family situations made them vulnerable targets. Emma wasn't Victoria's only victim. She was just her most profitable one. The files contained detailed surveillance reports on 6 other families in our neighborhood. Photos taken outside schools, schedule analyses, vulnerability assessments. Victoria had been scouting potential targets while helping Emma with homework and attending parent-teacher conferences. My phone vibrated with another message from Victoria. "David, please come home. I'm scared and the police want to interview us both. This is all becoming too much for me to handle alone." Still performing, even though she thought I couldn't see through her act. Still trying to control the narrative and position herself as the victim in this situation. But I learned something Victoria didn't know about her husband over the past 4 days. When David Chin's family was threatened, David Chin stopped following rules that protected bad people from consequences. Through the warehouse security system, I watched the handlers beginning their final preparations. They were separating the children into transport groups, conducting medical checks, and reviewing delivery schedules. Emma was in the priority group, first truck out, shortest route to the processing facility. She looked smaller than I remembered, sitting quietly on her mattress while strangers discussed her future. But she was alert, watching everything, memorizing details like I'd taught her to do during our camping trips. Always pay attention to your surroundings, Emma. You never know when information might save your life. She'd learned that lesson well. Now it was time for her father to apply the same principle. I downloaded everything from their systems, client lists, financial records, transport schedules, facility locations. Evidence that would expose an international network spanning 12 countries and involving hundreds of children. But evidence was just the beginning. At 3:30 a.m., I received final confirmation that local law enforcement had officially classified me as missing and potentially dangerous. Victoria's performance had convinced them that her husband was having a mental breakdown and might pose a threat to himself or others. Perfect cover story. When Phoenix's operation disappeared overnight, investigators would assume it was the work of an unstable veteran seeking vigilante justice. Victoria would be the grieving mother whose husband's trauma had driven him to violence. Except Victoria had forgotten one crucial detail about the man she'd married. David Chin didn't just find bad people and arrest them. David Chin made bad people disappear. At 4 a.m., everything went sideways. Emma started screaming. Through my earpiece, I heard chaos erupting inside the warehouse. Children crying, adults shouting, the unmistakable sound of someone in medical distress. My daughter's voice cut through everything else, high and terrified and calling for me. "Daddy, Daddy, help me." I abandoned stealth protocols and moved toward the building at full speed. Through the windows, I could see handlers running between the children, one of them holding a syringe while Emma thrashed on her mattress. They were sedating her early. Something had spooked them. Maybe Victoria's panicked messages, maybe my missing person report, and they were moving up the timeline. I had maybe 10 minutes before Emma was unconscious and loaded into the first transport truck. The loading dock had 2 guards who never saw me coming. Pressure points, zip ties, unconscious in under 30 seconds each. I moved through the warehouse like a shadow, using every technique learned from years of hostage rescue operations. The difference was that this time, it was personal. The first handler I encountered was preparing sedatives for the other children. He looked up just as my fist connected with his solar plexus, dropping him instantly. The second handler reached for his radio, but found my knife at his throat instead. "Where's the girl?" I whispered. His eyes went wide when he realized who I was. "You're Emma's father. You're supposed to be missing." "I'm supposed to be a lot of things." "Answer the question." "Loading dock." "There. They're putting her in the truck now." She fought the sedative. "It's not working properly." Emma had inherited her mother's metabolism, which processed drugs differently than normal. The dose that should have knocked her out was just making her sick and disoriented. I zip-tied the handler and moved toward the loading area, where I could hear Emma still crying weakly. Through the doorway, I saw her being carried toward an unmarked panel van by 2 men in civilian clothes. She was conscious but barely responsive, her head lolling as she tried to focus on her surroundings. When she saw me, her eyes widened with desperate hope. "Daddy." The men carrying her spun around, reaching for weapons they didn't have time to draw. I'd spent 12 years learning how to neutralize multiple threats in confined spaces. These amateur handlers lasted about as long as you'd expect. Emma collapsed when they dropped her, too weak from the sedative to stand. I scooped her into my arms, feeling how much weight she'd lost in just 4 days. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here. You're safe now." She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "Mommy told me you didn't want me anymore. She said I had to go with the nice people." Victoria had prepared Emma for this. She'd spent weeks conditioning our daughter to believe that her father had abandoned her, making the trafficking story seem believable. Emma had been kidnapped and psychologically tortured by her own mother. But there were still 8 other children in that warehouse, and I could hear voices shouting as more handlers discovered their unconscious colleagues. "Emma, I need you to listen to me carefully. Can you walk?" She nodded, though her legs were shaky from whatever they'd given her. "Good. I want you to go outside and wait by the blue car you'll see parked behind the building. Lock the doors and don't come out until I get there, okay?" What about the other kids? Even drugged and traumatized, Emma was worried about the other children. "That's my girl. Daddy's going to get them too. But I need you to be safe first." I helped her to the exit and watched her stumble toward my vehicle. She was weak but mobile, and the fresh air would help clear the sedatives from her system. Now for the hard part. The remaining handlers had regrouped and were trying to evacuate the other children through a back entrance. I could see them loading kids into a second truck while someone barked orders over a radio. "Phoenix, we have a problem. The father found us. Chen is here." Phoenix's voice crackled back through their communications. "Impossible. Chen is missing. Local police are looking for him." "Well, he's not missing anymore. He just took down half our team." There was a long pause before Phoenix responded. "Kill him. Kill all the children if necessary. We cannot let this operation be exposed." They'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because David Chun had spent his entire career learning how to handle people who thought killing innocents was an acceptable solution to their problems. Phoenix's kill order changed everything. The moment those words came through their radio, this stopped being a rescue mission and became a war. These people were willing to murder 9 children to protect their operation, which meant they'd crossed a line that removed any moral constraints on my response. I moved through the warehouse like death itself. The first handler who tried to execute Phoenix's order found himself face-to-face with 12 years of counter-terrorism training condensed into 30 seconds of pure violence. He went down hard and stayed down. The second handler was smarter. He tried to use one of the children as a human shield. Bad decision. I'd been trained to handle hostage situations by people who wrote the manual on precision shooting. Within 6 minutes, every adult in that building was either unconscious or no longer a threat. The children huddled together on their mattresses, too scared and confused to understand what was happening. "It's okay," I told them, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I'm here to take you home. All of you." A boy who couldn't have been older than 10 looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Are you really going to help us? Or are you just another person who's going to hurt us?" That question hit harder than any physical blow I'd taken tonight. "I'm going to help you. I promise. My name is David, and my little girl Emma is outside waiting for us. We're all going home together." I spent 20 minutes getting the children mobile and ready for transport. Most of them were weak from poor nutrition and psychological trauma, but they could walk. I called in support from my unit, unofficial support that wouldn't appear in any paperwork. By dawn, all 9 children were in protective custody, receiving medical attention and psychological support from specialists who understood trafficking trauma. But Phoenix was still out there, and Victoria was still playing innocent. My phone buzzed with her latest performance. "David, thank God you're alive. The police said you were missing, and I was so scared. Where have you been? Have you found anything about Emma?" She was at home, probably practicing her concerned mother routine in the mirror, preparing for the moment when she'd have to react to news of Emma's rescue. She'd cry with relief, thank God for the miracle, and ask how she could help her traumatized daughter recover. Perfect timing for our final conversation. I drove home as the sun was rising, Emma sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat for the first time in 5 days. She'd been checked by medical professionals, given fluids to flush the sedatives from her system, and was physically unharmed. The psychological damage would take longer to heal. Victoria was waiting on our front porch when I pulled into the driveway, dressed in clothes that looked like she'd been up all night worrying. Her performance was flawless, the perfect picture of a mother desperate for news about her missing child. She ran toward the car as Emma stirred awake. "Oh my God, is that Emma? Baby, you're okay." Emma shrank back against me as Victoria reached for the car door. "I don't want to see her, Daddy. She lied to me. She said you didn't love me anymore." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw calculation in her eyes as she processed how much Emma might remember, how much damage control she'd need to perform. "Sweetheart, you must be confused. Mommy would never say anything like that. You've been through something terrible, and your memory might be mixed up." Classic gaslighting, making Emma doubt her own memories to protect Victoria's cover story. But I had recordings of everything. Victoria's messages to Phoenix, her detailed profiles of Emma's vulnerabilities, her cooperation with the trafficking network. Evidence that would destroy her carefully constructed performance. "Emma, why don't you go inside and take a hot shower?" I said gently. "I need to talk to Mommy for a few minutes." Emma nodded and headed toward the house, still unsteady on her feet, but moving with determination. Strong kid. She'd survived something that would have broken most adults. Victoria watched her go, then turned to me with tears in her eyes. "David, thank God you found her. Where was she? Who took her? Are they in custody?" I looked at my wife of 10 years, this stranger wearing Victoria's face, and felt nothing but cold disgust. "They're all in custody, Vic. Every single person involved in trafficking our daughter, including the person who sold her to them." Her face went perfectly still. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you, Victoria. I'm talking about the $50,000 Phoenix paid you. I'm talking about the psychological profiles you provided to help them manage Emma's transport. I'm talking about the other children you helped them target." For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then Victoria's mask finally fell away completely. "You have no idea what you've done," she said quietly. Victoria's voice turned ice cold as her mask finally shattered completely. "You think you're some kind of hero, David? You just destroyed years of work. Phoenix doesn't forgive interference with his business operations. Neither do his clients. You've put Emma in more danger than she was ever in before. I stared at the stranger standing in my driveway, wearing my wife's face, but speaking with the calculated menace of a career criminal. This wasn't the desperate mother I thought I'd married. This was someone who'd been living a double life for years. Years of work. I kept my voice level, though every instinct screamed at me to end this conversation permanently. How long have you been selling children, Victoria? She actually smiled. A cold, bitter expression that transformed her features into something I didn't recognize. You really don't know anything about me, do you? About who I was before I became your perfect military wife. Enlighten me. Victoria walked over to our porch swing and sat down like we were discussing vacation plans instead of child trafficking. I met Phoenix 8 years ago, long before Emma was born. I was already working with his organization, providing intelligence on potential targets. Military families are perfect, fathers deployed overseas, mothers isolated and vulnerable, children with detailed medical and educational records. 8 years. Our entire marriage had been built on lies. Emma wasn't an impulse decision, David. She was always going to be part of the business. I just needed to wait until she was old enough to command premium prices and until I had enough debt to justify the transaction. The casual way she discussed our daughter's sale made my vision blur with rage. This woman had planned Emma's trafficking from the day she was born, had spent years studying her personality and vulnerabilities to create the perfect sales profile. You held her as a baby, I said quietly. You sang her to sleep. You took her to her first day of school. I did my job, Victoria replied. I provided excellent care for valuable merchandise. Phoenix's clients pay extra for children who've been raised with proper nutrition, education, and psychological conditioning. Emma's upbringing increased her market value significantly. She was talking about our daughter like a livestock investment. 8 years of bedtime stories, birthday parties, and family vacations had all been preparation for the moment when Victoria could cash in on her emotional manipulation. The gambling addiction was fake, wasn't it? Victoria laughed. Completely fabricated. I needed a plausible reason for financial desperation. Gambling debts provided perfect cover for why I might sell my own child. Very sympathetic motivation, the desperate mother forced into an impossible choice. Every detail had been calculated. Victoria wasn't a victim of circumstances who'd made one terrible decision. She was a predator who'd spent years positioning herself to profit from Emma's suffering. Phoenix has a standing offer, Victoria continued. Checking her manicured nails like this was any other conversation. Any operative who interferes with his business can expect retaliation against their family members. You've just painted a target on Emma's back that will follow her for the rest of her life. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Phoenix has resources you can't imagine and clients who don't accept disappointment gracefully. Emma was promised to someone very specific, someone very powerful, someone who doesn't forgive broken contracts. But Victoria had made a critical error in her psychological assessment. She'd assumed that learning about Phoenix's threats would paralyze me with fear for Emma's safety. She had no idea that threatening my daughter in my presence was the fastest way to ensure her own destruction. You're right about one thing, I said, pulling out my phone. Phoenix does have impressive resources. Victoria looked confused as I scrolled through my contacts. What are you doing? Calling my boss. You see, Vic, you weren't the only one keeping secrets in this marriage. I hit the speed dial and waited for the familiar voice to answer. This is Director Hayes. Sir, this is Agent Chun. I need to report a completed domestic operation with international implications. Victoria's face went white as she realized what she was hearing. Agent Chun. Hayes sounded surprised. You've been on administrative leave for the past month. Negative, sir. I've been conducting deep cover surveillance of an international trafficking network operating on U.S. soil. My wife has been my primary target. The truth was that David Chun had never been just a counterterrorism operative. David Chun was a deep cover agent for a joint task force that specialized in infiltrating criminal organizations that traditional law enforcement couldn't touch. And Victoria had just confessed to federal crimes while being recorded by someone with the authority to arrest her. Jesus Christ, David, Hayes muttered. Please tell me you have documentation. Complete digital records of the entire operation, sir. Financial transactions, client databases, transport schedules, and recorded confessions from multiple participants, including my wife. Victoria tried to run. She made it exactly 3 steps before I had her face down on our driveway with federal restraints securing her wrists. You son of a bitch, she snarled into the concrete. You played me. Actually, Vic, you played yourself. I've been investigating reports of trafficking activity in our neighborhood for months. I just never imagined the source was sleeping in my bed every night. Hayes was coordinating with other agencies through my earpiece while I secured Victoria. Within minutes, unmarked vehicles were arriving at our house and federal agents were taking custody of the woman I'd thought I'd loved. David, Victoria called out as they loaded her into the transport vehicle. You think you've won something here? Phoenix's clients include people who make government agents disappear. Emma will never be safe as long as she's alive. The transport door slammed shut, cutting off her threats. Hayes approached as the convoy disappeared down our street. How's Emma handling all this? I looked toward our house, where my daughter was probably watching from her bedroom window, trying to understand why Mommy was being taken away in handcuffs. She's going to need a lot of help processing what happened. Victoria spent weeks convincing her that I didn't love her anymore, preparing her psychologically for the trafficking. The betrayal trauma from her own mother is going to be severe. We have excellent counselors who specialize in this kind of situation. Emma will get whatever support she needs. Hayes handed me a thick folder. Phoenix's entire network. Your intelligence allowed us to coordinate simultaneous raids in 12 cities. We recovered over 200 children and arrested more than 50 traffickers. 200 children. Emma hadn't just been rescued. Her case had exposed an operation that was destroying hundreds of young lives annually. What about Victoria's threats regarding Phoenix's clients? Hayes smiled grimly. Phoenix won't be making any more threats. He was arrested in Dubai about an hour ago. Turns out several governments have been looking for him for quite some time. As the federal agents finished securing our property, I went inside to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing the clothes she'd been trafficked in. Daddy, is Mommy really a bad person? The hardest question I'd ever had to answer. Healing and new beginnings. I sat across from Emma at our kitchen table, looking into eyes that had seen too much for an 8-year-old. The question she'd asked hung in the air between us like a weight I wasn't sure I was strong enough to carry. Daddy, is Mommy really a bad person? How do you explain to a child that the woman who sang her lullabies and packed her school lunches had spent years planning to sell her to strangers? How do you help a little girl understand that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us become the very danger we need protection from? I reached across the table and took her small hands in mine. They were still trembling slightly from the sedatives, still bearing the invisible marks of everything she'd endured. Emma, sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people they're supposed to love. Mommy made some very bad choices, choices that put you in danger. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean you're not lovable. Her eyes filled with tears. But she told me you didn't want me anymore. She said that's why I had to go with those people. If she was lying about that, what else was she lying about? The depth of Victoria's psychological manipulation became clearer with every conversation. She hadn't just sold Emma. She'd systematically destroyed our daughter's sense of security and self-worth to make the trafficking process easier. She lied about a lot of things, baby girl. But here's what's true. I love you more than anything in this entire world. I will always love you. I will always protect you. And I will never, ever let anyone hurt you again. Emma climbed out of her chair and into my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck like she used to do when she was smaller. We sat there in silence for a long time, both of us trying to process how our family had been shattered and how we might begin putting the pieces back together. Over the following weeks, Emma started therapy with Dr. Sarah Martinez, a specialist in childhood trauma who worked specifically with trafficking survivors. The sessions were difficult. There were days when Emma would come home angry, days when she'd withdraw completely, days when she'd wake up screaming from nightmares about the warehouse. But there were also breakthroughs. Small moments when I'd catch her laughing at something silly on television, or when she'd ask for extra hugs before bed, or when she'd tell me about a good dream she'd had. Dr. Martinez says my brain is learning how to feel safe again, Emma told me one evening as we worked on a puzzle together. She says it's like when you hurt your arm and it takes time to heal, except this is my feelings that got hurt. The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze me. Emma was processing trauma that would have destroyed most adults, and she was doing it with a resilience that made me proud and heartbroken at the same time. 3 months after Victoria's arrest, Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. Daddy, why did Mommy not love me enough to keep me safe? We were sitting in our backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma was stronger now, physically and emotionally, but this question had been building for weeks. Emma, I think Mommy did love you, but she loved other things more. She loved drugs and money and feeling important to dangerous people. When grown-ups love those things more than they love their children, they make choices that hurt everyone around them. But I tried to be good, she whispered. I did everything she asked. I didn't complain when she was mean to me. I thought if I was good enough, she'd want to keep me. This was the heart of Emma's trauma, the belief that she'd somehow caused her own trafficking by not being worthy of protection. It was a lie that Victoria had planted carefully, systematically, over months of psychological conditioning. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. You are perfect exactly as you are. You were always good enough. Mommy's choices had nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with who she chose to become. Bad people don't hurt children because those children deserve it. Bad people hurt children because bad people make bad choices. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said something that nearly broke my heart. I'm glad you found me, Daddy. But I'm sorry it took so long. I was scared you'd forgotten about me. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been investigating Victoria's suspicious behavior, Emma had been living in terror, believing that her father had abandoned her. She'd endured psychological torture from her own mother while waiting for a rescue that seemed like it might never come. I never forgot about you, not for 1 second. From the moment I realized you were missing, every breath I took was focused on bringing you home. You are the most important thing in my life, Emma. You always have been, and you always will be. 6 months later, Emma started 3rd grade at a new school in a new city. We'd moved away from the neighborhood where Victoria had spent years surveilling other families, away from the memories of the life we'd thought we were living. Emma was different now, more cautious around strangers, more aware of her surroundings, quicker to seek reassurance about people's intentions. But she was also stronger in ways that amazed me daily. She'd survived something that would have destroyed many adults, and she was choosing to heal rather than let that experience define her future. Daddy, she said one morning over breakfast, Dr. Martinez says that when bad things happen to us, we get to choose what we do with those experiences. We can let them make us scared forever, or we can use them to help other people. What do you think about that? Emma stirred her cereal thoughtfully. I think I want to help other kids who went through what I went through. When I'm older, maybe I can be like Dr. Martinez and help kids feel safe again. The maturity in her voice took my breath away. At 8 years old, Emma was already thinking about how she could transform her trauma into purpose, how she could use her survival to help others heal. That evening, I received a call from Director Hayes with an update I'd been waiting for. Victoria pled guilty to all charges, he said. Federal trafficking, conspiracy, child endangerment. She's looking at life without parole. Phoenix and his network are completely dismantled. We're still processing arrests across multiple continents. Justice had been served, but I felt surprisingly empty about Victoria's fate. The woman I'd loved had never really existed. She'd been a carefully constructed identity designed to provide cover for criminal activities. The real Victoria was someone I'd never known, someone who'd viewed our daughter as merchandise from the day she was born. There's something else, Hayes continued. The children you rescued, all of them have been reunited with their families or placed in protective custody. The intelligence you gathered has led to the recovery of over 400 additional children worldwide. 400 children who were now safe because Emma's case had exposed the network. Her suffering had meaning, had purpose, had resulted in the protection of hundreds of other innocent lives. A year later, Emma and I were volunteering at a local organization that supported trafficking survivors. Emma was reading to younger children while I helped with administrative work. Watching her gentle interaction with kids who'd experienced similar trauma, I realized that Victoria had failed in the most fundamental way possible. She'd tried to break Emma's spirit, to condition her for a life of victimization. Instead, she'd created a survivor who was determined to help others heal. Emma's compassion, her resilience, her determination to transform pain into purpose. None of that came from Victoria's manipulation. It came from Emma's own fundamental goodness, a light that no amount of darkness could extinguish. As we drove home that afternoon, Emma asked me a question that showed how far she'd come in her healing journey. "Daddy, do you think Mommy ever thinks about what she did to me?" "I don't know, sweetheart. What do you think?" "I think maybe she does. And I think maybe that makes her sad. I hope someday she understands that what she did was wrong. And I hope she gets help so she doesn't want to hurt kids anymore." The forgiveness in Emma's voice wasn't for Victoria's benefit. It was for Emma's own healing. She was choosing to release the anger and pain that could have consumed her, choosing instead to focus on the future she was building for herself. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she said something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. "Daddy, I know something bad happened to me, but I also know something good came from it. All those other kids got saved because of what happened to me. Maybe that's why I had to go through it, so other kids wouldn't have to." The wisdom and strength in those words took my breath away. Emma had found meaning in her suffering, had chosen to see her survival as part of a larger purpose. She wasn't just healing from her trauma. She was transforming it into a source of strength that would serve her for the rest of her life. The lesson: sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of causing the deepest harm. Trust isn't something we should give blindly, even to family members. But when evil tries to destroy innocence, it often fails to account for the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Emma's story reminds us that survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about choosing how we let our experiences shape who we become. The strongest people aren't those who've never faced darkness, but those who've walked through it and chosen to become sources of light for others. Children especially have an amazing capacity to heal when they're surrounded by genuine love and support. Emma could have let Victoria's betrayal make her suspicious and bitter for life. Instead, she chose forgiveness, growth, and service to others. That choice didn't erase her trauma, but it prevented that trauma from defining her future. Real strength isn't about revenge or violence. It's about protecting the innocent, seeking justice through proper channels, and helping survivors rebuild their lives. David could have chosen vigilante justice, but instead he used his skills to dismantle an entire network and save hundreds of children. That's what real heroism looks like. That's our story for tonight, folks. Heavy stuff, but with a message of hope that I think we all needed to hear. Before you head out, I've got to ask, where in the world are you listening to this story tonight? Drop a comment and let us know your city, your country, wherever you're tuning in from. It always amazes me how these stories connect people across the globe. And hey, if this story hit you in the feels like it hit me, show some love with that like button. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more of these intense, emotional journeys every week. Subscribe if you haven't already, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. We've got another absolutely mind-blowing thriller lined up. A story of betrayal so shocking, revenge so perfectly planned, and justice so satisfying that you'll be talking about it for weeks. Until then, take care of yourselves and the people you love. You never know what battles they might be fighting in silence. Story is finished.